Welcome to the first in a series of videos on case writing. I'm Dr. Joel Bigley, and I'll be going through this section with you. The first video is on the conceptual part of case writing. The second video in this series is on the structure of your case. And the third is on how to use cases in a classroom situation. So to get started, let's talk about how you can start to put your content together for a case. First of all, let's make sure that you're in the right space and the right mood to write. For example, there are certain times of the day where you just don't feel like writing. It could be that you don't have enough data, you don't have enough focus. It could be that you are distracted by other things that are worrying you. These are all possibilities, and it makes it very difficult for you to be able to focus and write down information that could turn into a case. So we need to get that fixed first. So it's important to be in the right frame of mind. It's important to be able to focus and to not have a lot of distractions so that you can sit down and write. Now, I've found that for me, I do my best writing in the morning early. And not too early, but after breakfast, after I have my cup of coffee, that's when I'm ready to do my writing. That's when I can start to really focus on putting some things down on paper. So if that's you, if you find your place that you need to be, where there's no distractions, when you have your best energy, that's what you need to figure out first. And if you try or you try to force yourself to write in those situations that are not conducive to writing, it's going to be very frustrating for you. So don't bother with it. Just make sure that you can get those environmental things set up first and then start to focus on writing. So then what do you do? Well, think about an experience that you had. Think about maybe a conversation that you had. Think about some of the things that you're passionate about. How could they be a part of a case? Maybe there was something that you did that you can document, or maybe somebody else did something, and it's your opportunity to document what happened and write a case on it. Certainly you have certain passions, certain things that you're interested in. Those are great opportunities for you to write a case. So once you have everything figured out in terms of your environment so that you can write, then it's time to get going. And in the beginning, don't worry about spelling, don't worry about grammar, just write down your thoughts. Start with a bullet point list of things that are just facts about an area that's of interest to you. Just write it in bullet point form. It doesn't need to be in full paragraphs, and it doesn't have to have excellent grammar. You can do that later. You can come back later and look at what you've written down, refine it, add some things, fill in some holes. You might catch a couple of spelling mistakes, grammar mistakes. It doesn't really matter that much. You want to have this fulsome story that you can then turn into a case. So let me give you an example. So I have an interest in agriculture. And once I went over to another country, and I lived in a place that was pretty arid, and I knew a little bit about it before I went, and so I prepared. What I did is I had an interest in hydroponics. So what I did is I collected some of the materials that I would need for it, because I knew in this remote place there wasn't going to be any good grocery stores. It was going to be very hard for me to buy certain food items. So I thought, okay, well, what food items would I like that I can't get there? And so I took with me some seeds. I took with me some of the materials that I would need to set up a hydroponic scenario. And it worked out pretty good. And I was able to use water from the house and reuse it in the garden, and I was able to grow some things that were really good, and it turned out to be a really good experience. Then when I moved back to the US, I moved to a place where I was living on like a rocky hill, and there was no soil that I could use to have a garden. And the soil that was there was like clay. It was very difficult for roots to penetrate. It was even hard to grow grass there in my front yard. So I thought, okay, well, this is another opportunity for me to develop further some of the farming stuff that I wanted to do, or gardening stuff that I wanted to do. So I set up a vertical farm. It was an above ground farm, and I grew green beans, and I grew some tomatoes, and I grew some other vegetables. Also grew some watermelons and some other types of melons. And I was able to just go out to my above ground garden and didn't even get my feet muddy. And I was able to just pick what I needed, and I could go back in the house, make a salad, whatever. And I thought this is pretty interesting. So I have a little bit of an interest in crops and gardening and so on. So I thought, well, can I turn that into a case? So I started to do a little research, and I found that I found this situation where there's a grocery store in New York City, and actually on the top floor of the grocery store, they have a farm, and they grow various crops there. And what they do is they harvest the crops, and they just bring them down to the grocery store and put them in the shelf for people to buy. And I thought, well, that's pretty cool, because there are now these emerging food deserts in cities, because it's very difficult for the vehicles to come from the farms all the way into the city where all the people are that need to buy the food, and it's a little bit difficult. And these are becoming urban food deserts. So I thought, okay, well, this could be a potential case. So I started to research, and I came up with a number of different bits of information that were interesting. And I just started to collect information. And so over time, I would go back and I'd revisit, and I had this general interest. I'd revisit the information, I'd add some more onto my list. And I thought, okay, now I'm probably ready to turn this into a case. So filled in a couple holes, and I said, okay, let's come up with a hypothetical company, and let's use all this research information, and let's create a case. So that's what I did. I collected data. I started to really focus on operational performance of vertical farms. And as I researched vertical farms, not only in the US, but also internationally, I found some really interesting situations. So I was able to take that information and turn it into a hypothetical. This is where I created a hypothetical company, and the company was a company that would be supporting these vertical farms. And I set up some performance metrics, for example. In other words, what would be the amount of biomass per cubic foot, because the cubic feet metric is very important in a vertical farm scenario. So I was able to kind of put this together, and I got my case into draft form. So now I would look at it and I'd say, well, I can put a couple visuals in here. For example, I can look at some of the critical parameters. I could hypothetically map them out. I could look at some different scenarios. And so it worked out pretty good that I was able to put together all of that information. So this brought me then to basically the draft state of my case. So I wanted to make sure that my case was big enough. So typically a case should be between, say, 3,000 and 5,000 words. I know that might sound like a lot of words, but really once you start putting some information down, you'll probably find that that's not really that many words, and it's not really that difficult to put all that together. So I was able to put that all together, and then I was able to shape up my case really good. So in my case, I teach graduate students, and graduate students, they work in a work environment. They're all employed. They work during the day, and then in the evening they go to class. So they want information that's very real. They don't want a lot of information that doesn't relate to them or that they can't relate to. So the case information should relate to what's going on in people's work life. So it's real. It's something that they can apply. And they're really interested in certain things, and it could be for their current career, or it could be for their career in the future. So if you can give them information in a case that's real for them, then typically they're going to really be interested in that content. So I'll give you an example. I did a case in a class, and I had the group work on the case, and I had them get up and give a presentation on their case and what they came up with and answers to the questions and so on. And one of the people that got up and presented, she started to cry. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, what's going on here? She started to cry because when I asked her later, she said, this case is exactly the problem that I'm having at work. And she said, I've worked here with the people in my group, we've collected this information, and this is exactly what I need. And she was just very happy that she was able to participate in her group with this case because it would make a very big difference in her work situation. So it's very important to pick a relevant topic to make a good case. Now you might say, okay, well, I want to protect the company that I'm talking about, or I need to be careful about this data. Well, you can obfuscate the data. You can change it in certain ways so that it's not easily traceable back to wherever it came from. Or if you create a hypothetical company, which is a good idea, you can obfuscate that company as well. So you can change the information so that it's not as risky, or you don't have to be as concerned about it. So the principles in the case are going to apply either way. So it's important, though, that you understand what the relevant variables are. What are the relevant parameters? So in the case of the vertical farming scenario, like I said, I was looking at parameters around performance and biomass production. So now you've started to get a feel for how you can create a case and why it's important to make that case really, really relevant to what's going on with the students in their life. And later we're going to talk in video number 2 about how you can structure now this case. So you now have the basis for your story, and you have a lot of information. And in video number 2, we're going to talk about how to take all of that and put that into a structured framework. So I hope that you can be inspired to write down something that you're passionate about, something that you've had an experience with, that you can collect data about, or that you have a story about, and I hope that you'll be able to turn that into a case. I hope to see you in video number 2. Thank you, and have a great day.